Hi there, this is Mr. Brash again. I'm just going to go over two quick factoring examples for a quick and detailed video here. We have an interesting algebraic expression. We have been asked or tasked with factoring this, and at first it might not look like it is factorable. One thing we need to make sure is that we understand that g plus h and h plus g are actually the same thing. So let me just rewrite this, and I'm just going to put the g and the h in the same order in this second bracket. So what I get is I get g plus h and g plus h, and this second one is squared. And then the other thing we need to recognize is that when we do have a squared item, that means that it's written twice. That means it's itself multiplied by itself. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of factoring this entire question? Well, it means I have a common factor. From the left-hand expression here, I have a g plus h. So let me just underline g plus h. There we go. And from the right-hand expression, I also have g plus h. And you could say it's this one, or you could say it's this one. Doesn't really matter. They both have it in common. And that means that I can say that that is a common factor, the greatest common factor, in fact, between these two items. So I'm going to factor out this greatest common factor, and that actually might make more sense if I do it in yellow just to match my underlines. So I'm factoring the common factor of g plus h, and then that leaves me with 8f plus the remaining g plus h. I'll just keep it in its brackets for now. Now, how do we simplify this any further? Well, we don't need to do too much, but essentially we try to add our like terms in this bracket here. There's a 1 outside this bracket that we would distribute into there, and ultimately that just means there's nothing left to do. And that is as factored as that particular statement can get. It's not very pretty, but it's this example of noticing when you have patterns, noticing when you have like terms that you can factor out or commonalities that you can factor out. All right, I'm going to scroll down to a much more complicated example. So we have been given two pieces of information. We have been given the fact that p minus blah 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 equals 135. We have also been given the fact that 1 plus r is 15. I don't see a 1 plus r in here anywhere, so that's going to be useful later. So these two are given, and then we have been tasked with finding the value of p minus 11q. And I don't necessarily know how am I going to get the value of p minus 11q when I have all this other stuff. I mean, what can I do with this? So the first thing I would do is see if I can group or factor things together from that first statement. I'm going to take this very first statement that we have right here, and I'm just going to duplicate it down into a workable area. And I'm going to focus in on it. How can I factor this statement nice and neatly? Well, I'll do it by grouping maybe. Now, in this first two terms, they don't have anything in common, and the second two terms only have an r in common. So if I wanted to, I could say, okay, well, p minus 11q is kind of its own thing, and I could factor an r out of the two remaining factors here, and I'd be left with p minus 11q. Well, I've seen that before. It's right here. So I could factor it this way. That's one way that we could factor this question. And now that I've got some pieces, sort of what I can see is there's actually a 1 on the outside of this bracket that isn't really doing anything right now, and that is a 1 times that bracket, which means I have a common factor. My common factor is p minus 11q. And when I factor p minus 11q to these two terms, I'm left with 1 plus r, and that equals 135. And I'm at a position now where I could finish the question because they've told me what 1 plus r is. And I'm going to get back to that in just a second. But I also want to show another way that we could have factored this statement. I'll do this one in blue just to separate them. But if I don't recognize, like if I'm looking at this p minus 11q, and I think there's nothing in common there, but I do know that there's a p here, and there's a q here, and a q here. Or maybe some other factors that work like the negative 11. In fact, negative 11q is in both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange this. I'm going to say p plus pr minus 11q minus 11qr. And now I've got some items that are together that really do look common. I can factor a p out of the first two terms, and I'm left with 1 minus r. And in the next two terms, they both have an 11q. so I can factor out an 11q. And that in fact leaves me with 1 plus r as well, because when I factor out the negative, things become positive. And so I have the exact same factorized items that I would have had up here, because I've got a 1 plus r in common for both things. So I can factor 1 plus r out, and I get p minus 11q. And so we can see that this answer that I got in yellow, it matches this answer that I got in blue numerically, just that what I've done here is I've written the 1 plus r first. Okay, so now we have a factored version. In fact, we have two factored versions of this question. How do we finish this question? They've asked us to find the value of p minus 11q. And what they've done is they've given us the value of 1 plus r. 1 plus r is actually 15. So we're going to substitute into 1 plus r. We're going to go ahead and put 15. So instead of 1 plus r, we'll write 15. Great. And how do I get the value of p minus 11q? Well, I'm going to divide both sides by the 15. I'll divide 15 off here, and I'll divide 15 off here. And my writing's a little messy today. I apologize. Trying to go quickly. That leaves me with p minus 11q equals 9. And so I have established that the value of p minus 11q is 9. And so I can answer the question. Therefore, or however it is you want to answer this, p minus 11q is or equals the number 9. My p's and my 9s and my p's and my q's kind of look very similar, especially the q and the 9 here. All right. So that was another quick and detailed video from Mr. Brash. Hopefully you understood these two examples on factoring. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to leave it in the comments of this video or email me directly, contact me, whatever it is, and keep practicing math.